The coffee girl. What's she doing near the command tent? Someone move her out of there. The authoritative voice cut through the air, sharp with disdain, but when intercepted enemy transmissions crackled in, a chilling voice emerged through the static, calling out a name no one was prepared to hear. Her name. We want Ghost Viper. We know she's there. Every officer in the tent turned toward the spot where she'd been standing just seconds before. Who was she? And why would the enemy seek out a low-level logistics worker? What city are you watching this from today? If you believe unseen guardians still walk among us, don't look away. Jenna Rourke, 39, worked quietly at Forward Operating Base Echo as a logistics coordinator, coffee runs, managing supply requests, filing documents. Nothing glamorous, nothing that stood out. Her hair was always tucked neatly under a faded ball cap. Everyone assumed she was just another admin. No one questioned her background. No one thought to dig deeper. She lived simply, on time, efficient, unnoticed. But there was something about Jenna that slipped past most people. She had a strange knack for predicting operational needs before they were spoken, as if she once commanded units herself. When she delivered crates, she didn't just dump them randomly. She arranged them with purpose. Ammo and medical kits up front, gear in tactical order. A few seasoned sergeants noticed. They found her placement strategy oddly familiar, but then brushed it off. Probably just watches too many documentaries, one shrugged. A few junior officers mocked her behind her back. Probably here dodging real duty, they'd sneer. Just wanted the perks, not the danger. The comments stung more than anyone knew. Jenna heard them all, saw the dismissive looks, absorbed every smug grin. But she never responded, just pulled her cap lower and kept walking. One particularly embarrassing moment happened during a routine briefing. Jenna had been mistakenly summoned into the command zone while delivering reports. The officer looked up, irritated. "Why are you here?" he asked in front of the full room. "Support staff don't belong in restricted zones." Every head turned. Some smirked. Others looked away. Awkward. The silence stretched on. Jenna lowered her eyes, apologized softly, and backed out wordlessly. Her face burned, though her expression stayed calm. None of them knew that 3 years earlier she'd lost her entire team during a Black Ops mission wiped from every official file. The op had gone horribly wrong. Good people had died under her lead. The guilt never let go. She'd stepped away from active service by choice, choosing instead to disappear into background roles, quiet, unseen, safe from leading anyone ever again. The woman once known as Ghost Viper had chosen invisibility. Still, instincts don't die easily. Training lived in her bones. When she caught glimpses of tactical planning through doorways, she could see the enemy's next move before the staff did. When she overheard supply talk, she caught flaws even experienced officers overlooked. The same young soldiers who laughed at her didn't realize they were mocking a woman once ranked among the deadliest special ops leaders in the field. All they saw was a quiet woman nearing 40, doing simple work. They didn't see the night terrors. They didn't see how she tensed when chopper blades echoed above. They didn't notice how casualty lists made her flinch. Jenna had chosen this life as punishment. She thought she deserved the disdain, the lack of recognition, the loneliness. In her mind, she had failed when it counted most. Now, she would serve in silence, no honors, no risks, no praise. But some names don't stay buried. Some stories refuse to die. The next morning, she got another degrading task. Deliver sensitive files to a remote outpost, hot weather, dangerous roads, a 4-hour hike on foot. No one offered her transport. Vehicles were too critical for a basic delivery, the officer said with a smug grin. Jenna slung the papers into her weather-beaten backpack and began the trek. At the forward post, the same group of young officers were running training drills. role-playing field tactics like men who had never faced real combat. As Jenna neared with the documents, one of them spotted her and called out, voice echoing. "Hey, look, it's Ghost Viper," he said, referring to a nickname someone had spray-painted on an abandoned Jeep nearby. "Still good at counting bullets, coffee girl?" Laughter broke out. They had no clue that Ghost Viper was once a code name feared by hostage-takers worldwide. To them, it was just a joke. A cool name for the camp's logistics punchline. Jenna froze in place, her jaw tight. For 1 second, something fierce passed through her eyes, the kind of look that had once made enemies abandon their positions. Then she buried it, turned away, and walked off without a word. But anyone watching closely would have seen the hurt. Unfortunately, no one was. "Bet she'll cry herself to sleep tonight," one whispered. More laughter followed. They were closer to the truth than they knew. That night, Jenna did cry, but not for the mockery. She cried for the men she couldn't save, for the mission that shattered her confidence, for the career she walked away from in hopes of redemption. Later that night, everything changed. A recon team was ambushed at Ridgeline Alpha 15 miles out. Comms went silent. Protocol said to wait for assessment before acting, but that could take hours. Hours those soldiers might not have. Jenna was in the communications tent when the distress signal cut through. She looked around, saw hesitation on every face, the bureaucratic paralysis that had claimed more soldiers than enemy fire. Jenna stared at the tactical display, analyzing approach vectors, fallback routes, and known enemy locations. Her hands began to shake, not from fear, but from the sharp adrenaline jolt she hadn't felt in over 3 years. Every fiber of her being urged her to grab a kit and move now. Every rational voice told her to remain hidden, stay safe, stay irrelevant. Her eyes locked on the blinking red marker on the screen, the patrol caught in the ambush. Good people were out there dying while she stood here pushing paper and pouring coffee. The guilt was crushing. Without requesting clearance, without alerting anyone, Jenna quietly slipped out of the comm center. She retrieved her personal loadout from the secured supply cage, armor that still hugged her form like a second skin, weapons that settled into her hands like they'd never left, gear she had once sworn never to touch again. The night air was still and moonless as she moved across terrain that would have overwhelmed even elite recon units. But Jenna wasn't just another operative. She had once been something far beyond that. She reached the firefight zone in exactly 14 minutes, cutting silently through hostile territory like vapor. What happened next would be passed down like myth among the troops she saved. Though her real name would remain unknown, the extraction was swift, flawless, punishing to the attackers. When reinforcements finally arrived, the danger had already passed. Losses were light, and the team was safe. An unidentified female operator gave support. The team leader relayed through comms. Call sign unknown. Came out of nowhere. Vanished the same way. Skill set far beyond standard. But the true shock came a half hour later. As Jenna cleaned her gear under cover of darkness, a foreign broadcast came in on an unsecured channel. The voice was raw with dread, fury, and unmistakable recognition. It echoed from the base's radio hub. All units, fall back now. Ghost Viper is in the region. Repeat, Ghost Viper is operational. The voice belonged to Hassan Klov, a war criminal who had slipped through the fingers of international justice for more than a decade. A man who had once seen Ghost Viper in action during a classified rescue op. A man who still woke screaming from dreams of that day. Inside the command center, silence fell. Eyes moved from the speakers to to the doorway where Jenna had stood only hours ago. The officer who had mocked her during that day's assignment turned ghost white. The lieutenant who had laughed at her looked physically ill. The base commander, now grave, reached for a secure line to request access to ultra-classified archives. For the first time in 3 years, the code name Ghost Viper was uttered with the awe and fear it had always deserved. They had ridiculed her, overlooked her, treated her like she didn't exist. But someone had always remembered her name, and that person was the enemy. What's more frightening, when those beside you don't believe in you, or when your enemy still remembers your name in the middle of war. And sometimes the enemy's fear is the most honest measure of who you are. If you agree, type enemy in the comments. A warrior's reputation lives in the fear of their rivals. The base commander's fingers trembled as he entered his top-level clearance codes. The files required Admiral-class credentials, records so restricted that even most generals had no idea they existed. The terminal blinked, then flashed a red alert. Phoenix Protocol eyes only. Partitioned access needed. After one final authorization, the monitor turned black. Then, slowly, it revealed a truth that would shake the entire command. Jenna Lynn Rourke, designation Ghost Viper, former leader, Special Ops Unit Phoenix, status, missing, presumed KIA, Op Blackwater, March 15, 2021. The commander's complexion paled as he flipped through her record. 11 confirmed hostage extractions, 17 high-level targets eliminated, 0 failed missions, until the last one, the one that officially ended her career. But she hadn't died. She had survived, dragged herself out of that wreckage, and vanished, choosing anonymity over facing the families of those she couldn't save. The commander stared at the screen, images more powerful than words. Jenna in full kit, leading impossible missions. Jenna being recognized by redacted officials. Jenna surrounded by teammates who looked at her like a legend. The final item in the file was a recorded debrief. The colonel's voice shook with sorrow. Major Rourke's unit was compromised during extraction. We lost all comms for 6 hours. Later, signs of heavy combat were found, but no bodies. Intel suggests complete team loss. Major Rourke fell, protecting a team. Recommend posthumous Medal of Honor. But the report had been wrong. Jenna hadn't died. She had lived, crawled from that nightmare, and chose to fade away instead of living with the weight of one more loss. The commander closed the file, then made his way slowly to the communications office. Everyone snapped to attention when he arrived. Something in the air had changed. "Where is she?" he asked in a low voice. The officer who had handed her the degrading courier task that morning could barely speak. "Sir, we don't know. She hasn't returned yet." "Find her." Within 60 minutes, Jenna was located and quietly brought back to the base. She didn't fight, didn't ask why. She had been waiting for this moment for 3 long years. When she entered the commander's office, he stood tall behind his desk in full dress uniform. But instead of staying seated in authority, he did something that stunned everyone. He rose and saluted, not the casual kind given out of routine, but the firm, reverent salute meant for warriors, the kind given to those who had bled for their country. "Major Jenna Rourke," he said with formality, "on behalf of this command, I apologize for the indignity you suffered." Jenna remained silent, eyes fixed on a point beyond his shoulder. She had long learned that speaking during moments like this never helped. "Your record speaks for itself. Phoenix Unit rescued over 200 lives under your command. You were instrumental in dismantling some of the most lethal terror cells in modern warfare." He motioned to a chair, but she stayed on her feet. "The question isn't why you're here," he said, continuing. "The real question," the commander said, "is how we failed to realize who you were." For the first time since entering the office, Jenna spoke. Her voice was calm, but just above a whisper. "Because I didn't want to be recognized, sir. I wanted to disappear." "That's not your decision anymore. Major Hassan Klov now knows you're alive, and likely half the extremist groups in this region know you're back in action. You're a target whether you accept it or not." His words settled over the room like a thick fog. Jenna had hoped the rescue would slip under the radar, that she could vanish again. But legends don't choose when they're remembered. "What happened during Operation Blackwater wasn't your fault," Commander added gently. "I've gone through the confidential after-action summaries. Your unit was compromised by someone inside our own intelligence system. There's no way you could have known." Jenna's composure slipped for a split second. Years of guilt flashed across her face before she steadied herself. 12 good soldiers died because I made the wrong decision, sir. 12 died because a traitor betrayed them, but 47 hostages lived because you made the right call in impossible conditions. That's what leaders do, Major. They carry the burden so others don't have to. Just then, a knock interrupted the conversation. The young lieutenant, who had ridiculed Jenna earlier that day, stood in the doorway, his face flushed with guilt and nerves. "Sir, the men, they asked me to—" He paused, searching for words. "We'd like to apologize. We didn't know." The commander glanced from him to Jenna, then back again. "Lieutenant, what you didn't know is that Major Rourke has earned more combat commendations than the rest of this base combined. What you didn't know is that she has saved more lives than you've likely ever met." The lieutenant's stance sagged under the weight of realization. Jenna faced him squarely. When she spoke, her tone held the calm authority of someone who had earned respect in the harshest corners of the world. "Lieutenant, the next time you see someone whose story you don't understand, ask where they've been, not why they're here. Experience teaches what manuals never can." The young officer nodded quickly, then asked the question that had burned in him since that intercepted message. "Ma'am, would you ever consider training us? We could learn a lot." Jenna looked at the commander, then at the lieutenant. For the first time in years, she saw something other than suspicion in a soldier's eyes. She saw genuine interest, humility, and respect. "We'll see, Lieutenant. We'll see." The following morning felt different. Jenna rose in the same modest quarters she had occupied for months. But something fundamental had shifted at Forward Operating Base Echo. She headed to the mess hall as usual, prepared to serve coffee and check supplies. But what she found caught her off guard. A brand new unit patch sat neatly on her work table, the phoenix symbol stitched in golden thread against black cloth. Below it, her name and rank: Major Jenna Rourke, Ghost Viper. The same young lieutenant stood nearby, nervous but resolved. "Ma'am, the guys pitched in and had that made overnight. We thought you should have something that reflects who you really are." Jenna picked up the patch, fingers tracing its embroidery. It had been 3 years since she'd worn anything tied to her past life. It felt both unfamiliar and perfectly right. "We were also wondering," he continued, "building confidence. If you might lead some sessions, tactical drills, situational thinking, whatever you believe we need." Before she could reply, other soldiers began trickling into the mess hall, but instead of grabbing coffee and heading out, they lined up quietly in a single respectful line. The first person was the officer who had embarrassed her during the briefing. His face was red with shame, but his stance was straight and sincere. "Major, I owe you. I treated you unfairly, and I'm sorry. May I buy your coffee today as a sign of respect?" One by one, those who had dismissed, ignored, or mocked her came forward. Each gave an honest apology. Each asked for a chance to learn. Even the seasoned sergeants who had quietly noticed her supply habits stepped up. "Ma'am, "We knew something was different about you," one said. "The way you stacked gear, the way you walked the base. We should have recognized a professional when we saw one." Jenna listened to each of them, never interrupting. When the last voice faded, she looked around the room at faces that now showed curiosity instead of ridicule, understanding instead of arrogance. "I came here to disappear," she said quietly. "I thought I deserved to be unseen after what happened to my team. I believed that serving without credit was the price I had to pay." She looked down at the patch in her hand. But hiding from responsibility isn't the same as accepting it, and you can't recover from wounds you won't face. She lifted her eyes to the room. "If you want to learn, I'll train you, not for redemption, but because solid troops deserve solid guidance, and because the best way to honor the fallen is to make sure fewer fall." The room filled with quiet applause. For the first time in 3 years, Jenna Rourke smiled. Not the polite smile she wore like armor, but a real smile that reached her eyes. She pinned the phoenix patch to her uniform right over her heart. "Training starts tomorrow at 0600. Bring your gear. Bring questions. We've got work ahead." As the others filed out, already chatting about their new instructor, the young lieutenant stayed behind. "Thank you, Major, for giving us a chance to set things right." Jenna nodded, then said something she hadn't expected to say. "Thank you for showing me that not all mistakes are final, and some stories earn a second act." 6 months later, FOB Echo was one of the highest performing training installations in the area. Jenna's tactical instruction was requested by units across 3 military zones. But the real change wasn't in stats or medals. It was in how soldiers treated each other. The young officer who had once taunted her now led recon teams with discipline that impressed senior leaders. The duty officer who once shamed her had become one of her most focused learners, attending every session with the humility of someone who'd learned the hard way. Jenna still served coffee every morning, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. It became a ritual of unity, not invisibility. Troops lined up not just for caffeine, but for the small wisdom she passed out with every steaming cup. "Major," a new recruit asked one morning, "how do you spot someone's real talent when they're hiding it?" Jenna smiled, thinking of her own path from shadow to strength. "It's not about what they do," she answered. "It's about how they do it. True skill leaves a fingerprint, even when someone tries to disappear." What she taught went far beyond strategy. She showed them how to read people, how to sense what was needed before it was said, how to lead with quiet strength. Most of all, she showed them the human behind the uniform. "Everyone you meet carries a story you can't see," she told her students. "Some scars don't show, some wins are silent. Your job isn't to judge the story, just remember that it exists." Her legacy stretched beyond the wire. Enemy activity in the area dropped, not from more weapons, but sharper instincts. Jenna's trainees identified threats and openings other teams had missed. Hassan Klov, the warlord who once recognized her codename, had reportedly relocated operations across the ocean. Some legends cast long shadows, but Jenna's greatest impact wasn't military. It was cultural. The base adopted a new rule before dismissing anyone as unimportant. Every soldier had to ask one thing: what do I not know about this person's story? One evening, as she stood watching the sun sink behind the hills, the young lieutenant approached again. "Major, do you ever regret coming back, choosing to be visible again?" Jenna thought about it as the sky turned from gold to violet. "I spent 3 years thinking that staying hidden was healing," she said. "But some wounds only mend when you stop shielding them from the light." She turned to him, her face calm and clear. The world doesn't need more noise, but it always needs more people who can see clearly, act wisely, and serve quietly. Sometimes real courage isn't in being seen, it's in teaching others how to see. Subscribe if you believe that valor doesn't always wear medals. Sometimes it walks beside us, silently making us better.